Welcome to Financial Perspectives, the podcast, where we cover timely topics related to the current economic environment and keep you up to date on investment news. We also provide insights on how investors can maintain a long-term perspective. Please stick around at the end for important disclosure information. More information about Foster Group can be found in our ADV brochure at fostergrp.com.
Hello, and welcome to this special episode of Financial Perspectives. We recently had the privilege to interview Professor Meir Statman about his new book, among other things. Professor Statman is a legend in behavioral finance and financial education. Meir is the Glenn Klimek Professor of Finance at Santa Clara University, and his research focuses on behavioral finance. Perhaps his most famous book, What Investors Really Want, changed how we view investor motivations. Professor Statman is a member of the advisory board of the Journal of Portfolio Management, the Journal of Wealth Management, the Journal of Retirement, the Journal of Investment Consulting, and the Journal of Behavioral and Experimental Finance. He's a busy guy. He is also a consultant with Avantis Investors, who helped us to get connected for this interview. Professor Statman's latest book, A Wealth of Well-Being, A Holistic Approach to Behavioral Finance, was published by Wiley in April of 2024. In it, he explores the third generation of behavioral finance, which describes people as normal, but is explicit in describing life well-being as people's overall want. This generation broadens its lens to see people as whole persons and show them in the domain of finance, but also in the domains of family, friends, health, work, education, religion, and society. I hope you enjoy this very interesting conversation with Professor Meir Statman. So, Meir, thank you again for joining us. As we get started here this morning, one of the things I found interesting just in reading at the beginning of your new book was kind of your personal story. And I think our listeners would be interested in kind of where you've come from over the course of your life and maybe a little bit of how that influenced your professional choices as well.
Well, I was born in 1947 in a displaced persons camp in Germany. That's a polite word for refugee camp. My parents were survivors of the Holocaust. They were teenagers in Poland when the Nazis invaded. They escaped with their family to the Soviet Union, and then wandered in Siberia and down to Uzbekistan, where they met and got married. And then they couldn't really go back to Poland, and so they went to that displaced persons camp in Germany, and from there they and we came to Israel in 1949. So when I think about that, I think about luck. I think about resilience. That is, you ask yourself, what kind of portfolio would they have to hedge against the Nazis coming after them? So one thing that, of course, stayed with me and is part of my book is the notion that risk is about life. It is not just about finances. And you can see, of course, major things, the Nazis are coming, but even less major, a disabled child, a divorce, poverty, all of those things that matter more than your portfolio going down by 20%.
Yeah, the life story like that puts other things in perspective in terms of what might happen in the next. I might say this later. I'll say it now. We're recording this the day before the election in the United States. And so I know there's a lot of concern about potential risks from results of elections, but even that kind of pales in comparison with some of the risks that you were just describing that your family has gone through over the years. So when you think about your choice of career, kind of getting into finance and then behavioral finance and this whole, now even, I think people think about finance oftentimes as a numbers type of a situation, but obviously your book, this Wealth of Well-Being and the idea of well-being, it's a lot more than just dollars and cents in terms of your areas of interest and the things that you've looked at. How did you I'm always curious on the people's choice and how they get to their career. What led you into the area that you are in?
Well, I'm good with numbers, but I'm even more interested in people, as all people are. When I was about to enroll at the university, my father suggested accounting. Well, I thought that's going to be boring. I don't think that it is much about people. I chose economics and I chose statistics to complement it, thinking that economics will have a lot to do with human behavior. It turned out that instead of human behavior, we had this model of rational people. Here's a story that is, I studied at the Hebrew University in the late 60s. Next to my building, the building of economics, was the building that housed the psychology department. And I would go there for experiments to earn some pocket money. Well, Kahneman and Tversky were doing their work in that building at exactly that same time. But I had no idea who they were. I didn't know their names. None of my teachers mentioned them. So that was really the time of standard finance, where we learned about Modigliani and Miller's rational people. Rational people don't care whether they get a dividend or not, because if they don't get the $1,000 dividend they expected, they simply sell $1,000 of stock. Well, it's not. But you do what you have to do, and I answered the questions on the exams right and got good grades, and so I graduated. But it stayed with me, that something is missing. And then when I saw it was in New York. We came in 1973 in the summer, just before the Yom Kippur War and the Arab embargo. And oil prices went up, and so Con Edison, the utility of New York, did not have money because they had to pay more for oil, but they couldn't raise their rates because they are regulated, and so they had to cut the dividend. Well, mayhem, the meeting, the annual meeting in 1974 was that some people rushed to the stage to do harm to the chairman of the board. And so I was thinking, why is that? Don't they know about homemade dividends? and so once I learned the stuff that Kahneman and Tversky were working, I said, aha, light bulb. And I could see how those things connected. And there was no behavioral finance at the same time, but I was really fascinated with here's theory and here's life. For many of my colleagues in finance, life be damned, I'm staying with theory. I say, if a theory and life do not match, it is the theory that goes, not life. so that was the beginning of it. And that was in the early 1980s.
Yeah. There's a quote, I think Richard Thaler, one of the ones I like, he's like, behavioral finance is not saying people are dumb. We're just saying the world is hard. And I really like that idea that the world is complicated and how we interact with it as people. We have a lot of emotions that run in there, things of our kind of ability to forecast a bad outcome, and we get worried about the future. So lots of feelings. In your book, you talk about kind of recognizing, I think you call it a third generation of behavioral finance. The first one was maybe more, rational actors acting badly. Second one was, we're doing the best we can. And then the third, you mention lots of different domains or spheres, kind of a more holistic view.
Yeah, well, let me say it this way. So we started with standard finance that I just talked about, the notion that if you don't get the dividend, you just create a homemade dividend. No big deal. Now, in the first generation of behavioral finance, which I was part of at the very beginning of the 1980s, we called people irrational rather than rational. That we said, for example, it is irrational to get riled up about not getting a dividend. Just create homemade dividend. And so the assumption of standard finance is that what investors care about is maximizing their wealth. In the first generation of behavioral finance, where they call them irrational, we say people are still interested in maximizing their wealth. That is the goal, but they make mistakes along the way. For example, they trade too much, wasting money rather than adding to their wealth. In the second generation, what I said, people are normal. That is, people are surely not dumb, surely not irrational. People want some things that are going beyond those maximizing wealth. That is, when we buy watches, for example, we know that a $50 Timex watch shows the same time as a $10,000 Rolex. But there is more to a watch than showing time. It says something about who I am. I can afford a Rolex. It makes me proud. And so I said, stocks, bonds, wealth, they have expressive and emotional benefits. Let's treat them as products. And then in the third generation of behavioral finance, what I say is that people are normal, as in the second generation, but ultimately, the goal, what we really want, is life well-being. Now, we need financial well-being for life well-being. You cannot support a family without money. You cannot see a doctor without money. But eventually, it is life well-being, and life well-being kind of goes beyond maximizing wealth. And so what I see myself doing, not that I had that plan from the beginning, is expanding the domain of finance. I tell this story about a client coming to his advisor in March of 2009, all shaking, and the advisor says, "What are you complaining about? I put you on the mean, variance efficient frontier." We all know this is absurd. The fellow now thinks that the world is coming to an end, that he will never ever be able to retire. And so what we are trying to do, really what I'm trying to do, is expand the domain of finance. And there's a lot of literature that I use in the book, from sociology and psychology and economics, that talks about life well-being. And of course, those academic studies are wonderful. They are rigorous, but they are dry. And so what I did in the book was to pair them with stories that give color, that give life to those dry statistics. I learned many things myself along the way as I was studying it. And that literature is not really known to financial advisors, to investors. And so, I had fun doing this book, and I hope that people would have fun reading it.
Yeah, it's a really good collection of just what you said. There's some really interesting statistical studies in there, and your footnotes are extensive at the back of the chapters. But the stories, some of the quotations even that some of those studies pull out, just, someone sharing something about their life personally, it's like, yeah, that's how people think or feel, or, that's how they pursue some of those things. Matt, one of the places you write, you say, we need financial well-being to enjoy life well-being, but it's life well-being that we seek. So you just kind of mentioned that idea. Could you kind of talk about, when you think of life well-being, what are the categories or domains as you see them that wrap underneath that idea of life well-being?
Well, so think of all the domains that really come to mind when you ask people, what is important in life. They're likely not to begin with money. They're likely to begin with family, friends, health, education, work, religion. society. That is, as you just mentioned, tomorrow is election day. On Wednesday, half the country is going to be happy and half the country is going to be miserable. Society matters a great deal in well-being. And there are lots of books that say what is really important is marriage, or what really important is personal relations, friends, and so on. But I don't see life as a pyramid this way, where you go from kind of basic needs like Maslow to self-actualization, whatever that is. What I think of life well-being is really very much like a portfolio that we all know. That is, the reason we diversify is because we don't know what the future is going to bring. And so some stocks do wonderfully, and some stocks tend up to be dogs. And what we do is we kind of look at the average, look at the total of it. Well, my sense of life well-being is similar. That is, there's family, there's friends, and so on. No person has it all perfect. Okay, so it might be a disabled child, it might be a serious illness, it might be a divorce. There are, it might be a work that is less than satisfying, and so what I'm thinking of is really thinking about life well-being as a portfolio of those domains, and moving resources from domains where you have plenty to domains where it is missing. In my particular example, we have two daughters. Our older daughter, Barbara, unfortunately lives with bipolar illness. And so, that of course is our point of pain. But we have an ample financial domain such that we can support her without impinging on our own budget. We can still do what we want. And we are very lucky in the family domain in that Barbara's younger sister, Ruth, loves and supports her. And so we know that Barbara is supported now by us, her parents, and by Ruth. And when we are gone, we hope, we expect that Ruth is going to be involved in her life and is going to help her. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking not about a hierarchy where family comes at the top or friendship comes at the top, but rather about that portfolio. Now, in our case, it is a disabled child. It might be a nasty divorce. It might be a major illness, an early death, all kinds of things. We cannot fix it all. If I could fix Barbara's health, surely I would. But what I do is really remedy as can be by using resources from other domains to help that.
Yeah. And Meir, you mentioned at the beginning of the book, you kind of start off in the financial domain and you break that down into a few things. And I think a couple of times you even mentioned, say, well, there's some uniqueness. I won't say necessarily it's the peak or the highest priority, but you do talk about some uniquenesses in that financial domain that give it just what you described, the ability to help in other domains where there might be less strength. Can you talk just a little bit about how you think about that financial domain maybe differently than the other domains?
So financial domain is indeed unique in that, one, on its own, it matters in life well-being. That is, one, you surely need some minimum to live on. But even beyond that, that is, if you think about those expressive and emotional benefits, you ask yourself, why does somebody with $1 billion work so hard to get another billion? Well, the answer is, of course, that he is competing against Joe, the fellow who has $2 billion. And so social status matters a great deal to us. Having money, even much less than $1 billion, means that if a calamity happens, your car breaks down. Okay, so it's the transmission. It's more than $3,000. You say, well, stuff happens. You take it to the garage. You charge it on your credit card. You probably pay it in full the month after. But a poor person, it might be that he or she does not have the money to fix the car. Without a car, they cannot get to work. Without getting to work, they don't have income. You can see the kinds of problems that occur in real life. And so you can think about the emotions, you can think about the frustrations of people who have more money. I'm not talking about billionaires. I'm not even talking about millionaires. Just having enough such that you can fix the car, and people who don't, and that really is a big deal. Now, having money is, of course, necessary then for the other domains of well-being. Even religion, if you go to church, everybody puts money in the plate, and you have empty pockets. It is surely embarrassing at the very least. So money matters everywhere. Surely money matters in education. You have to pay for education. Money matters even in friendship. That is some friendships that I read about is, now destination weddings are popular. So they go to Hawaii. You are my dear friend from my college days, but I don't have the money for going to Hawaii and hotel and so on. Some people say, well, I understand that. Some people might even give you the money, but others say, gee, if you were a real friend, surely you would come. And so some terminate friendship based on that. And so you can see money helps in many ways. What do you do if your friends are wealthy bankers who think nothing about $300 dinners and $500 bottles of wine, and you are a professor, a journalist, and they are your friends, you went to college with them, but for you, $300 for a Michelin star restaurant is more than you can afford. Unless you find ways to finesse that, you might well lose that friendship.
Yeah. Boy, that's really true. I know I've talked to certain friends, and they, even or in clients where they like to travel with other people. And what happens is, as kind of life goes on, you learn who can travel in the same way that you're comfortable traveling. And that kind of financial matching, if you will, can really help make those kinds of trips more enjoyable than wondering or worrying about, can this other person afford it, or what experiences are we going to forego on their behalf? Whatever it might be, there's just some things that can make that difficult from a financial perspective.
Yeah. So in economics, we tend to exaggerate the importance of money. Wealth is really what matters. When people talk about it outside of finance, they tend to denigrate the role of money. They talk about family and friends and so on. But again, you should not exaggerate it, and you should not denigrate money. It is really important, but it's not the only thing that is important.
Yeah, I like the portfolio illustration. I think is a good one of, well, for one, variety of strengths and potential weaknesses, also a diversification of benefit. There's some of these areas may not be as strong as others, and those areas may change over time. I think as a young married, my financial domain was not particularly large in terms of the portfolio of assets, but we had good friends. And so, and we all kind of agreed that, playing cards on Friday night and having popcorn was fun, and it didn't cost anybody a lot of money. Later on, maybe as we think about now, I have some friends, and so going to play golf, that's a different financial decision that maybe wasn't as doable when we were initially married.
Yeah, one of the really interesting finding from the literature about life well-being is that evaluative well-being uh, declines from kind of early adulthood to middle age, and then increases like a U curve. So evaluative well-being, think about a question where I say, okay, imagine a ladder with steps, with rungs that go from 0 to 10. 0 is the worst life that you can imagine for yourself. 10 is the best. Where are you? At a 6 or a 7 or 8 or a 9? Uh, so evaluative well-being, as I said, declines from early adulthood to middle age, perhaps mid 50s, and then begins to increase. Well, I'm way beyond that middle age, and so I can testify that it surely is true for me. And when you are young, your aspirations exceed your situation. Now you cope with that. You realize that popcorn is food, just as pate. Uh, but you're still, trying to figure out life. What kind of career will you have, and so on? Will you get married? Um, and then when you get to be my age or even younger, you say the heck with it. That is, I don't need a Michelin star restaurant. I can just go home and slice a tomato, or have some popcorn, and that kind of sense of, yeah, I've made it. Even if you are not the richest man in the universe, you are doing fine. The family is okay, and so on. And that really is what is happening. What is somebody mentioned, that the life well-being of young people now is diminished by those comparisons, by those status comparisons. You see on Facebook, everybody is having those terrific weekends, on a sailboat, and here I am just watching television. Well, as they say, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. But it is really hard for people not to care about other people. That is, we are by nature comparing ourselves to our reference group, to our comparison group, and it is easy to say don't compare yourself to others, but it is really hard. It is easier when you are older and you let things slide.
Yeah. You mentioned evaluative well-being, and I know in the book you talk about two other kinds as well. There's kind of the experienced aspect and the meaning aspect. Could you just kind of describe those for us and how they fit?
So experience well-being is emotional well-being. It is, how do you feel now? Is it, do you feel happy or sad or frustrated? And again, money matters, as I said, in experience well-being, because yes, the wealthy might be frustrating because Joe got a bonus that is better than theirs. He got 200,000 and you got only 100,000. But if it is persistent, that you worry all the time, will you have enough money to feed the kids, to fix the car, to do the usual things in life? Of course, it diminishes your experience well-being and your life well-being as a whole. The meaning well-being really is kind of, ask yourself, do I know why I was put on this earth? Is there something about it that I can say? My dad used to say that people are judged by how many people come to their funeral, and not just to check that they are really dead. That is, have you have you left some legacy? Are there people who say, this person really, if not changed my life, really affected positively my life? That is about meaning. All of those things matter in a life well-being.
Yeah. I think what I appreciate in that is that, like when you just said there, all of these things matter, and you're contrasting that with the idea of a pyramid. Well, let's get to the thing that matters most, and so you start chasing just the one thing as opposed to paying attention to this is the whole picture here that we're talking about in your life, not just getting to one thing. I think one of the best or one of the hard ones you'll ask. So after a trip, we got back from a trip recently, my wife, and we were talking about, well, what was the best thing that happened? And it's this idea of trying to pick out the one thing. Sometimes I think that word best or most is a really hard one to put in a question because it asks you to rate everything as secondary and put one thing as the best thing.
Yeah.
As though the other things then somehow are diminished because they weren't the best, even though they were great, along the way.
And many times, the most satisfying things are the small things, those small surprises. And so when we were in Spain recently, we rented a car in Bilbao where the conference was, and we drove to Madrid, where the airport is, and along the way we spent the night in Segovia. And so there are many interesting things that Segovia, for example, has a Jewish quarter. And so we kind of drove through it. There was no way to park. And, that these are those small things that connect with you. It is not necessarily this big building. When we were in Barcelona, it was a Sunday. They didn't let tourists go into the cathedral, but if you said that you are there to pray, they would let you in. Well, I teach at the Jesuit university, so I am an honorary Catholic. So I said that I'm going to pray. And so I went in and we sat, and it was beautiful, organ music and singing and so on. It was, so these are wonderful things that happen that kind of surprise you.
Yeah. So I'd like to change gears a little bit. A lot of our people who listen here maybe are in retirement or contemplating retirement. And when I think about kind of this well-being, life well-being construct, I think it's natural for people to think about, well, I'm building towards this experience of retirement and I want to make sure that I'm preparing along the way. So there's all kinds of experiences we're having along the way. We want to focus on those things too. But one of the ones, particularly when I think about this domain of well-being of work, and the meaning that comes with it. When you think about people kind of transitioning from actively working to whatever their view of retirement is, what kinds of things should people be asking themselves or not worrying, wondering about, thinking about as they prepare for that change from working to retirement?
Well, the change can be enormous, especially if you go from full-time work to nothing. And so people find different ways to fill their lives with with perhaps part-time work, volunteer work. My dad, when he retired, he would not take volunteer positions because his sense really is that if you don't get paid for it, you're not valued. I tried to persuade him otherwise, but did not. My wife is retired, but she does a lot of volunteer work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. She's helped so many people and families in that work. and that really adds to her life, in addition to family and so on. And so it is important to find things that will fill your life. People think that golf is going to do it. Well, it's not sufficient to do that. But let me speak about one aspect that I'm sure that you have encountered and others have encountered in working with high net worth individuals. Most high net worth individuals did not do it by getting a Google or the like. Most really worked in a profession or had a business and so on. And they are, I think of them as being kind of accidentally wealthy people. In fact, I'm one of them. And so you end up with more money than you really need. And as you and many others know, the problem with those accidentally wealthy people is to get them to spend. And they say, I still like popcorn more than pate. Sure, but you can afford pate, you can afford a cruise around the world. You don't like it. Well, find what you like. So in our particular case, we kind of made this transition some years ago when we flew to Israel, long distance. We were on the wait list for upgrade to business class, but we were not upgraded. And then we said, the heck with it. We are sufficiently well off and sufficiently old to pay these outrageous sums for business class tickets and get that. And at the same time, we increased our contributions to charity so that we can say, yeah, we're taking care of ourselves, but we also take care of others. So say, I don't like to spend on myself. Fine. How about spending on your kids? You don't have to die for them to have that money. If they are all set, how about establishing a savings account for the grandkids? How about the community? My wife and I, as I said, we are fortunate financially. And so we established an endowment at Santa Clara University of several $1 million to support the work of my colleagues in the department, because people who contribute to a university usually contribute for a building or for scholarships. All of these are important. But people from outside the university don't really realize how much of our efforts as academics are into research. And that does not really get supported. And so for somebody like me who knows that, that is where I thought my money is going to make the most impact. And so, again, when you're old, kind of count your blessings, realize that you have achieved all you're going to achieve. You're not going to win even bronze in the Olympics. And now it is time for you to really find meaning in leaving money now. Don't say, well, I had to work really hard for that money, and so my kids have to work hard too. That is stupid. That is, your kids need that money when they are in their 20s and 30s for down payments on a house, to pay off college loans and so on. Not when you die at 95 and they are 65 and retired. Now in Israel, it is, part of culture really is that you help kids when they get married. In the United States, it is not so. And I think that is I'm not talking about, I think that we can learn from other cultures. And in this case, the Israeli culture, I think, is better than the American culture.
It reminds me of a quote that I had written down on my notes here. You say this, but excessive self-control turns us into misers, saving too much and spending too little. excessive self-control is as prevalent as insufficient self-control. I really like that.
Exactly.
I think that's, and then you say the relation between patience and well-being is hump-shaped. Too little patience diminishes well-being, but so does too much patience. This idea of waiting too long to give or trying to do way too much too early. Either one can cause a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. You're a young man. You saw a woman, perhaps on the subway, perhaps someplace else, that seemed kind of really interesting. I'd like to start a conversation with her, but I'm too shy and I have too much self-control. Uh, then you step off the subway, and a day later you say, gee, that was really too much self-control. I wish I started a conversation. Perhaps a date would have occurred, perhaps more. uh, so we need of course self-control. Not everything that comes to mind should come out of our mouth, but too much self-control is as damaging as too little.
Yeah, it's not everything that comes to mind should either come out of our mouth or through our fingers in email or on some social media posting. Sometimes a little more self-control would benefit people at times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That benefit. One area that I'm particularly interested in, just personally, and I think it relates to the area of retirement and just kind of aging well, if you will, or how we do that, is in the area of developing relationships. And I've read different articles around this Harvard study of adult development that's tracked lives of, a group of men over a number of generations. And they talk about people who have aged well. And one of the things that they conclude is one important indicator of kind of a positive aging experience is good relationships along the way. I think it lines up with that idea of social and relational capital that you described there. In your book, you talk a little bit, and as does, I think it's Robert Putnam in the book Bowling Alone from a few years ago, how our participation in institutions where maybe those relationships form seems to be declining for whatever reason. Do you have any thoughts on how maybe we could pursue relationships even outside of our family, or how important that might be in terms of someone looking at that kind of, hey, in planning for retirement, don't just plan for your retirement portfolio of investing money, but also you might want to be investing in some people because that's going to be as important for you. Is that the case, do you think? Or
Yeah, I think, some of us have friends who we met in elementary school, maybe in college, but many of those relationships kind of drift away. People move, uh, people get married, and so on. And so creating new relationships really matters, and it is difficult. It is difficult. I tell the story of of a woman, a psychiatrist, who said that some men have to go through a colonoscopy, but it requires that there is a person who will come pick them up afterwards because they're going to be under sedation, not an Uber, some person. And they say, I don't have anyone I can call. And her husband said, let me check on my friends or people I know. And I said, if I asked you to come pick me up after a colonoscopy, would you do that? And all said yes. And so people are really quite open to friendship, quite open to spending time together, helping one another. What we need to do, which is of course easier said than done, is really to reach out and say, hey, can we have a cup of coffee and talk, and then talk about those things that really matter. It is not like, my son goes to Harvard, your son goes to Yale, and so on. That is really sharing what really matters. I was speaking with a colleague, and I told him about my daughter, about that mental illness. He told me about his younger daughter, who unfortunately was in a very terrible accident and damaged her brain. And now he said their life revolved around helping her. So, I empathize with him. He empathized with me. Now we are colleagues, but we are also friends. That is, I know about him things that really matter, things that are central to his life and things that are central to my life. And he knows that I will support him, of course, with empathy, but if need be, support him beyond that with material resources. That really is what is necessary. And it is hard. It is really hard even for advisors because they, let's talk about the Fed, let's talk about the election, let's talk about, how about talking about my life and yours? Sometimes clients are going to come and say, before you plan for us, you should know that we have a disabled son and we have to establish resources for him to support him even after we are gone. But at other time, they don't. I think that one use of that book is to share it with clients. And clients are going to find stories that are mirrors of them. And advisors can have conversations that say, what did you think about this story or that one? Which struck you as being similar to yours or different? This will kind of create a sort of breaking the ice. Now, for some advisors, many advisors, most advisors are crossing the line, of course, from finances to life, but that can help those who do not, and that can help those who do it a bit better. Because once you talk about a mother who writes about a 14-year-old that suffered cancer for a long time and then passed away, how can you not feel for her, and how can you not put yourself in her shoes? I don't care about pets. I don't eat them, but I don't care about them. But my two daughters have cats, no kids, but I can empathize with them. I'm not making fun of those people who have pets and treat them as children. I say, well, that's not what I do, but I can imagine that in the same way that I care about babies, and when I see a baby sitting in the same row, I kind of wave to them and smile, and so I can see how they feel about pets, and that the kind of empathy is something that we can experience and express.
Yeah, I would. Boy, the empathy in a meeting with between advisors and clients and things, it does get more meaningful. I think the results get better actually when all those personal concerns start to come out, because there are some things that you just can't quantify. I can run a simulation on a number of portfolios and tell you, well, here's the up and down outcomes on those, but that may not connect at all with what's really important to them in terms of thinking about, I don't know how to be done working with these relationships and entering this next. There's just two different categories of question.
That is right. Yeah, that is right. I say you don't have to be a psychologist. You just have to be a good friend. That is, can I help that a friend of mine with a daughter who has brain damage? I'm not a neurologist, and even neurologists aren't able to do much in this case. But I can empathize at least. They know that they are not that they're not alone, that God did not choose them to inflict pain, that just life is like that. And whenever I speak about my daughter, I just spoke about it with someone I know, and he told me that he's going to see his 95-year-old father, who was in very good health until 2 weeks before. And you know that he cannot cure that. He cannot make that father be 20 years old now, but he can walk with him towards an end that would be an end where that person knows that the children are grateful to him. That really means a lot. I told my daughter that she should cremate me because I was passing by a funeral home, and I saw kind of an older man and a younger man, perhaps his son, shoving a casket into a station wagon. And I said to her, please don't treat me like nothing.
That's a good picture. I'm not sure anybody wants that one. Oh, boy. Oh. Well, as I mentioned earlier, so let me kind of close up with this one. Today is the day, we're recording this the day before the U.S. election. I think some people are concerned about what those outcomes might be. One of the things we try to do in our conversations in this podcast series, Financial Perspectives, is we talk about this idea called educated optimism. I just feel like optimism, generally, if we have a choice in how we're going to look forward, that if we can choose optimism, and particularly if we can choose it in a way that's based on reasonable information, kind of an educated optimism, that life, the likelihood is things will go better, or will at least feel better along the way, if that's kind of our outlook. And in your book, certainly there's some great quotations about just the advantages of optimism, actual physical health, mental health kinds of things. So let me ask you kind of a bit of a personal question. Are you an optimist, Meir, and how do you maintain an optimistic point of view?
Well, there are many ways to answer it. One of them is to think about my parents. Okay, so here they are. They're teenagers. They crossed into the Soviet Union. They have nothing with them. They are, you can call it grit or whatever. They didn't have grit training. They just do what is necessary. They have optimism that things are going to be better day by day. So my parents met and they got married. So they had something to look forward to. They had kids. They had something to look forward to. My dad had work that paid the bills and was in fact satisfying in many ways. When I got married, his friends, even though he moved, his friends from those grocery store supermarkets that he managed years before, they came to the wedding with their families. It was wonderful for me to see them because I saw them when I was a kid, working there in those supermarkets as a helper. So you have to have that sense that things are going to be better, and where things are not, you will despair. I was despairing when I found my daughter ill, and I was trying to help her, and I didn't really see the light, and I was told that must be the fault of her parents. But I found optimism in my work. I tried to find optimism in my marriage, however difficult it was at the time, and so on. And so I think that a good friend is going to say, when you tell them about your trouble, you're not alone. Things are going to be better. I am your friend. I'm going to help you in that. that is how we do that. That is, we really help ourselves and we help one another when we are in the dumps. But we know that things are, we hope, reasonably, as you said, realistic optimism that things are going to be well. I'm not going to live forever. I know that. I'm not trying to live to 150. I'm not even trying to live to 100. But I know that my children are going to be by my side, and I know that there are some students who are going to remember me favorably and say, gee, that professor really helped me grow and become who I am now.
Yeah. As I hear you tell those stories, it makes me think one of the things that helps us with optimism is actually being in relationships with others who provide encouraging words, who can mirror things back, who, like you said, can empathize, walk with us. Because the people who are talking to us from behind a screen, a news media source or someone writing there, they're not really our friend or we don't have a relationship with them. So what they say, it may be disturbing, and they don't get to see how disturbing it might be to us. Whereas if we're talking with a person and they can see what we're struggling with, or we see what they're struggling with, that empathy together and the kind of reminders of, let's remember that things have, for the most part, have the opportunity to get better. It may not be better right away tomorrow, but there are things we can do, and we can walk together in that relationship and have an experience that at least gives me some degree of optimism or looking forward in the future.
That is right. And people are kind. That is, when I talk about my daughter, people don't say, well, that's your problem. Our lives are perfect. People will typically empathize and share something about their life that is not perfect. And so, people are good. People are kind, with very few exceptions. And so we should know that, and we should reach out and respond when others reach out to us, and help when we can. This really is sort of, you talk about the meaning of life. At some point, it gets to be, yes, I have enough money. I don't have the frustrations, the experienced well-being problems of not having money for fixing the car. But eventually, you ask yourself, does my life have a meaning? Is there something that people are going to remember about me positively? I think about those people who are my mentors, who are my teachers. A teacher in high school, my English teacher said, I see you, Meir, not just getting an undergraduate degree, but also a graduate degree. Well, you're in high school. And a teacher tells you that you're going to go through graduate school. Boy, that kind of trust and that kind of sense. Well, maybe that he knows something. He went through graduate school. You can hear my gratitude in my voice. Boy, I wish he were with us so I can say thank you once more. I did have a chances to say thank you. That is what I'm talking about. Eventually it is about life. We need money, but it is life well-being that we seek.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Professor Statman really is a legend in behavioral finance, as well as a gracious and wise person, as I'm sure you heard. Thank you again to him and to our friends at Avantis Investors for connecting us for this episode. I hope you find yourself choosing educated optimism more and more as you listen into our conversations on financial perspectives. It's not always easy, but we think it's always worth it. Until next time, thanks for investing your time with us today.
The previous presentation by Foster Group was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the presentation serves as the receipt of, or as a substitute for, personalized investment advice from Foster Group or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy, or or any non-investment related or planning services, discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. Foster Group is neither a law firm nor accounting firm, and no portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. No portion of the content should be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if Foster Group is engaged, or continues to be engaged, to provide investment advisory services. A copy of Foster Group's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.fostergrp.com/disclosures.